When Overwatch 2 was first announced, a lot of people had trouble justifying the 2 at the end of the title, and for good reason. After all, largely the game looked the same, graphically, gameplay-wise, and sure, they were adding some new heroes, some new maps, they were modifying some maps and a new mode and all these things, but that was all stuff that one could more justify as like an addition to the existing Overwatch and Overwatch 1.5 or an Overwatch 1 Chapter 2, rather than as a full-fledged sequel. But alongside those updates to the PvP, they did announce a PvE mode that would involve a whole campaign with skill trees and whatnot that seemed pretty comprehensive and that upon release might be able to justify that too at the end of the title. Well, now Overwatch 2 has absolutely no business being called Overwatch 2 because that PvE mode, as we knew it, as it was promised, has been scrapped. This was confirmed by the developers themselves via recent dev chat, and here's a clip that was posted by Jake Lucky, and you can see for yourself what they said. Here we go.
And so we're left with another difficult choice. Do we continue to pour all that effort into PvE, hoping that we can land it at some point in the future? Or do we stick with this set of values that we've aligned on and focus on the live game and focus on serving all of you? With everything we've learned about what it takes to operate this game at the level that you deserve, it's clear that we can't deliver on that original vision for PvE that was shown in 2019. What that means is that we won't be delivering that dedicated hero mode with talent trees, that long-term power progression. Those things just aren't in our plans anymore. And we know that this is going to be disappointing to many of you, which is why we wanted to bring it up before we talked about the roadmap. And to be perfectly honest, it's been really difficult for many of us and a lot of folks on the team who've poured their heart and soul into that stuff.
So first of all, look, I feel for the devs because I'm sure it wasn't up to the majority of them to decide to scrap this mode that was far into development, but things just weren't moving along at a rapid enough pace. So ultimately, the higher-ups' decision was to scrap it altogether. Now, they talk about values. You know, do we stick to our values and keep updating the PvP?
Or do we stick with this set of values that we've aligned on and focus on the live game and focus on serving all of you?
Look, while I know that when they announced the PvE mode, it wasn't their plan, their vision of the future to scrap it completely, it doesn't change the fact that Overwatch 2 was marketed with a PvE as its marquee feature, as the thing that would justify that too, that would make this experience feel like a full-fledged sequel. And now people who've invested into Overwatch 2 are just not going to get that, and you know, it's just that kind of marketing is so deceptive. Even if this wasn't how they wanted things to go, it doesn't change the fact that there's clearly some kind of woeful mismanagement here, that they just couldn't predict the scope of this project to such an egregious degree that a lot of players who were engaged with Overwatch 2 looking forward to this PvE mode that would justify their experience with the game, they are no doubt feeling duped, and for good reason. All this waiting for absolutely nothing. Regardless of what happened behind the scenes, the second that Blizzard made such a huge deal about the announcement of this PvE mode, they had a responsibility and obligation to deliver, and they failed, miserably on that front, on a level that I feel is rare even in this AAA landscape where we have seen a lot of flubs. Look, I know game development is hard, but Overwatch 2 to me has always felt like a project that should not have launched when it did. You know, they decided that they'd launch the free-to-play mode first, and then they would release the PvE after. You know, I always had the thought of they should have planned on releasing the two modes side by side with each other to really make sure that Overwatch 2 feels like Overwatch 2, like a complete sequel package from the outset. But I was willing to wait for that PvE mode that would complete the picture. And now Overwatch 2 is just Overwatch 1.5. The 2 has absolutely no place in the name anymore. And the kind of mismanagement that has to happen for them to miss the mark so much when it comes to their predictions on their ability to manage the scope and ambition of what they were pursuing. This is one of the worst managed AAA projects in recent memory, I feel. And the marketing for this game, it's so questionable now morally. How can you promote such a marquee aspect of a game and then pull the rug from under players who were told that this was coming? Here's the whole situation summarized by this Overwatch YouTuber, CarQ, who posted the following thread that reads as follows. Overwatch 2 update from the dev chat. Original PvE vision from 2019 is no more. Talent trees scrapped, and there will be no standalone version. It's just little bits of PvE such as missions/stories released with each PvP season as part of their live service. Man, not only were some of the most compelling features of the originally promised PvE mode significantly scaled back, PvE is now essentially being served piecemeal, little bits at a time instead of as a whole complete experience, which is just not what I wanted. I wanted a full campaign-like experience. That's what people are looking forward to, something that feels complete from the outset. Instead, now we're going to have to wait for every season to bring us new updates, and even then, what PvE content we do get as part of now the live service, it's just going to be a significantly downscaled version of the original vision. CarQ continues, I'm not a dev, but I know tons of ideas and products get scrapped behind the scenes without public knowledge. But the problem is that this was a big public announcement and a flagship feature of Overwatch 2 that the game was sold on. I mean, you overpromise and underdeliver, people are going to be disappointed. I know I am, as everyone has every right to be. I know it wasn't an easy decision for the team, but this just sucks, man. I just don't think they had enough resources to get it out in time. And as Aaron said, without a definitive date in sight. So the business strategy now is always prioritize the live service game. And of course, it'll be the priority. It's the thing that can recurrently monetize from a business standpoint. It's what makes sense. But in terms of serving the Overwatch community, like, this news couldn't be more disappointing. This campaign PvE idea actually sounded like something that could revitalize the series in a significant way. And now for them to resort to essentially integrating PvE into your traditional live service model that has kind of grown stale, it's just really, really disheartening. Now, CarQ clarifies here that there is still PvE, it's just going to be packaged differently with continual smaller content drops alongside the PvP seasons, which is just not what I was looking forward to and what many were looking forward to. There is going to be story-based events, a new story arc for Overwatch 2, co-op features, canon and non-canon, hero mastery missions, LTMs. Tough to say goodbye to a huge part of the PvE appeal, which was the talent tree. Maybe parts of it will get repurposed or repackaged in the future. Was an Overwatch a product of a failed Blizzard game, Project Titan? Maybe it's just the copium talking. I don't know. I guess only time will tell, but whatever version of PvE we do get integrated into the live service is probably going to be a shadow, a shell. I wanted one epic, continuous feeling experience rather than what is essentially now episodically split up PvE content that is going to be bite-sized compared to the original vision of this full-fledged campaign-like experience. Yeah, this just kind of really kills Overwatch 2 for me. Here's a Twitch streamer going by the name Stilosa, who also expressed heartbreak by saying, we've gone from Overwatch 2 featuring a fully fledged PvE campaign with deep hero progression, hero talents, and much more, to seeing that very idea gutted to bulk out a woeful free-to-play battle pass system. What a terrible situation. And this is somebody who's also baffled by the level of mismanagement that has occurred with this title. Is this game one of the worst examples of fumbling what was a globally recognized IP with a huge fan base? I feel for everyone still involved on the development side. I know this is obvious, but Blizzard has very much been business over gameplay over art for years now. That stack needs to be reversed if this game wants any kind of longevity in the coming years. A quality product will generate revenue, but yeah, I understand a shitty free-to-play effort can also generate money. The game has gone from a $2 billion IP to whatever the hell it is now, but hey, at least I can be one of the few people to say I've played PvE with talents way back in 2019. For those who, got to preview that stuff, I guess, they got to get a taste of what was to come. But for the rest of us, we just kind of have to accept that Overwatch 2 is, I don't even know, They need to get rid of that too at the end of the title. Here's another pundit expressing similar sentiments about how poorly managed this project has been. As a massive Overwatch fan, says Benji Sales, who's played constantly since beta for Overwatch 1, it's possibly the most mishandled major gaming IP I've ever seen. Overwatch 2 is still very popular, but so much money and opportunity for growth has been left on the table due to years of mismanagement. I couldn't agree more. Yes, it's still doing well enough, but imagine how much bigger this IP could have been had the campaign launched alongside the PvP mode, had the PvE been this fully fleshed out thing, and had they play their cards right, not rushing Overwatch 2 to launch, and just being more meticulous about the management of all of their ambitions with the sequel. Overwatch, I think, could have been in a significantly better place. Plenty of people pointing out how this PvE was the thing that was going to justify Overwatch 2, but, you know, with this PvE mode now being completely scrapped, or at least being hollowed out to a point where it's no longer recognizable, what's the point of Overwatch 2? You know, why does it exist instead of it just having been an update to Overwatch 1? You know, that PvE story campaign in Overwatch 2, the thing that justified the 2 at the end of the name? Blizzard scrapped it, and now it's tied to the Battle Pass. It's actually freaking over. Here's a similar tweet from another pundit who said, "You mean the entire main reasons and big pulls for Overwatch 2, that being a deeper single-player campaign, is canceled? Activision Blizzard is such a pathetic company." And these are tweets that are garnering tens of thousands of likes and millions of views. As you can see right here, same with this one right here, 14,000 likes and 500,000 views already. And these tweets have only been up a couple hours. These sentiments will spread further across social media, and the optics are just going to be really awful for Blizzard. We're at a point now where I just feel like it's impossible to trust anything Blizzard says, any optimisms they express about their ongoing and upcoming projects. This all makes me question whether Diablo 4 will somehow be mishandled. So far, so good, but come launch day, will something happen where the game's optics will be ruined and they won't be able to fulfill certain ambitions and promises? I don't know. I hope not. I'm really rooting for that game because it does look damn good, but stuff like this just makes me question everything about Blizzard. And this is a company that's already been on mighty thin ice. Here's one more for good measure. Somebody commenting on the very reason for Overwatch 2's existence being completely scrapped and pointing that out. Once again, tens of thousands of likes, hundreds of thousands of views. This is just a topic that, will make quite a few headlines throughout the coming days. As all this is unfolding, I've seen some people bring up this tweet from back in January 2022 from Tracy Kennedy, who's now at Riot but was formerly with Blizzard, was a producer on Overwatch, and had this to say about Bobby Kotick that may potentially reflect on why things turned out the way they did with Overwatch 2 PvE mode. Bobby, tell everyone about the random projects for Overwatch 1 you all would shove us on. The team would do overtime for only them to get canceled, and for months of Overwatch 2 dev to have been lost. Or how almost entire teams are turning over and citing you as the reason. Don't be shy. This might potentially highlight one aspect of why the PvE mode fell apart, why they just couldn't get this project to come together. I'm sure it's a combination of a number of factors, but when you hear about how executive decisions can lead to so much wasted work and so much manpower, resources, and time being lost, I'd say that could definitely be a contributing factor to the PvE mode falling apart. Now, to close things off, I want to go through this article published by GameSpot's Timur Hussein. He actually reached out to Blizzard and managed to speak to game director Aaron Keller and executive producer Jared Noose about all of this, and there's plenty of information to unpack here, so let's just go right through it. The article aptly begins by highlighting the original promise of Overwatch 2. It was with the promise of a PvE hero component that would allow players to gather their squads and play through a narrative-driven multiplayer experience. On top of that, each of the heroes that they'd come to know and love would be reworked for PvE and given progression systems that would allow players to unlock new talents. It was an ambitious new mode that in many ways was used to justify the 2 at the end of the title. Overwatch as a series is currently in desperate need of something to revitalize the series. The PvE was supposed to be that. I'd say it was a critical component to allowing Overwatch to grow as an IP, and Blizzard has unfortunately really just failed and drop the ball on that front, and that will no doubt confuse and frustrate players, of course. This interview opens with the question of, is it safe to say that this PvE mode is completely scrapped? Is that an accurate characterization of it, or would you say it's just shifted direction? Aaron Keller responded with, we're doing part of what the team had set out to do, but not the entirety of what we discussed back at BlizzCon 2019. So the real focus is on the story missions and that experience, as opposed to more open-ended hero mode and that stuff. That's a long-winded way of saying the PvE mode we promise is just not happening. Eventually, when pressed further, when asked, so it's fair to say that the experience that you showed during the first Overwatch reveal is not going to be the one that will be released at any point. Aaron Keller admitted, yeah, exactly, so we're definitely not doing the hero mode and the talents and that power progression system, which was the main draw of this sequel title. When did you realize that you weren't going to be able to execute on this project? And this is an enlightening part of the interview where Aaron Keller said, in the years following our announcement event at BlizzCon 2019, we had a really large portion of our team working on the PvE side of the game, and I think players of our live running game could feel that because we eventually stopped making content for it because so much manpower went to this in-development PvE side of things, and it detracted from content additions to the PvP component. It's been maybe 2.5 years since the last hero that we launched, and we don't want to be back at a point where it's another 3.5 years since launching a PvP map. So we really looked hard at what we were doing with the live game in service of this much bigger thing that we were working on and hoping to release later. The interesting thing about it is it's such a difference releasing content for players that are playing your game instead of saving up all of that content for one big release that you're going to do later. So we came to the realization that this wasn't the right way to be developing for all of Overwatch. It was about 1.5 years ago that we made the decision to really shift strategy. That's when we rapidly shifted the resources on our team to work on launching Overwatch 2, and that's what came out last October. At the same time, what we came away with from that first experience was a new value for developing Overwatch. I don't know how not delivering on the most exciting thing that you advertise about your project is considered in any way, shape, or form a kind of value that you hold. It was a new value for running the team, namely to always be putting out fresh, exciting, fun, new experiences for our players. As we were running up to launching Overwatch 2, we realized that we could not build that other game, the PvE mode. We couldn't save up all of that content over the course of what was looking to be at least the next several years to finish it. And by doing that, pulling more and more resources away from the people that were all playing our game and all the people that would be playing Overwatch 2. Basically, they came to the realization that logistically, it was impossible to both manage the live service component of the PvP to a satisfactory degree while also in parallel developing this big PvE experience and campaign mode that would essentially split the team too much, would spread the team thin, and wouldn't allow for the PvP component to thrive. They'd have to pull so many resources to create this PvE that would take years to make that it was just not tenable. And look, the explanation is appreciated, but it doesn't change the fact that it's you guys' fault for not taking all of these logistics into consideration. It's like logistically, that's up to management to, well, manage all that and to make sure it's within a certain scope before announcing to the public, here's what we're doing. Ultimately, they made the decision later last year that we would focus all of our efforts on the live running game and all of our PvE efforts on this new story arc that we're launching in Season 6. And then on top of that, to keep all of our PvE efforts, all of our co-op efforts invested in our seasonal releases rather than that one big box release. Now, one big takeaway from all of this is that they actually knew well in advance before announcing today that the promised PvE mode would be scrapped. It says right here that they made the decision later last year that they would make this shift, and yet only now are they announcing that this is what's happening. So they knew for a while that this is how things would turn out, and yet they kept dragging Overwatch players or Overwatch onlookers by the nose who were looking forward to this PvE mode for months. It all just feels so deceptive and underhanded and manipulative that they would let people linger with this thought of, hey, at least the PvE is coming. Now, the interview does address the management side of things. Resources, time, and other necessities that you would have needed to make PvE were factored in when you originally came up with a plan to create this game. Presumably, what has changed since then that now you're in a position where you can't do it? Jared admitted that when you make a plan originally, it's based on a general idea and direction, but you don't really know how it turns out until it starts taking shape, and by then you might realize that certain things are not working or that logistically, things might just be a lot more ambitious than originally anticipated. And I get that, but how much they missed the mark by with this PvE mode, with how early they announced it, and then how much they've had to scale back, it's just on a whole other level. And in the case of this PvE mode, it was admitted that this was tough because the team was building something that is totally different than anything that they'd built before. This PvE format's very different from what they built with a PvP, so I'm sure there was just a lot of adjusting to a whole new type of development environment, new tools and technologies that they had to make to realize what was very much a very different game mode from the PvP. And the team kind of learned along the way what it took to actually make this. They learned more about the time, the iteration, and the technology required. It just became clear that the schedule wasn't going to work. And then Keller stepped in and added, the scope of the hero missions was really, really large, and what it was going to take to finish it was going to be a pretty remarkable, massive lift. You think about making a game that is supposed to be almost its own standalone co-op experience that people are going to be able to play as a main game, and not just how do you put all of the content into that to finish it. Even just a small piece of it, the talent trees, 40 to 50 talents per hero, over 35 plus heroes. You're looking at thousands of talents to make everything just to get the game out the door, plus all the content and missions you'd be playing to do that, and it is a pretty gargantuan ask for a team. And then on top of that, you need to run that as a live game, so content has to continually come out for that side of the game. Again, I'm not saying it all doesn't sound incredibly ambitious and overwhelming, but this is what you set out to do, and what you ultimately announced to the public you'd set out to do and ultimately ship down the line. As CarQ said in a series of tweets, I know tons of ideas and products get scrapped behind the scenes without public knowledge, but the problem is that this was a big public announcement. With the scrapping of this PvE mode, the value of Overwatch 2, I feel, is ultimately now non-existent. Keller also added that it just didn't look like there was a definitive end date in sight where we could finally be able to put the stamp on it, or that end date was years away and it no longer felt like we could be doing that to our players, or we could be doing that to the live game that we were running. And that's when we took the moment to shift strategy and put everything into the live game. They really should have just kept updating Overwatch 1. It just feels like they rushed Overwatch 2 to launch because they wanted to give it a new title, make it seem like a full-fledged sequel, to sort of try to revitalize the hype surrounding this game, to try to get a little more monetization out of this series that was running out of juice. And instead of being patient, biding their time to make sure that the PvE was in a good enough place alongside a more enhanced PvP to justify the two in Overwatch 2 before announcing and then shipping them together, it just felt like they had a quota to meet. You know, they had to make a new Overwatch, and so they just kind of threw whatever they could out there and then hoped that they could get the PvE together alongside it, but then all of that fell apart. The interview then brings up the argument that this PvE mode was the thing that was going to justify Overwatch 2, and on that front, here's what Keller had to say. We have talked a lot in the past about Overwatch 2 and how different it is from the original game, even just being free to play and swapping to a 5v5 team format and all the new content that we have developed for it, changing the monetization model, reducing the number of players in a team by one, and some new content here and there. Those elements alone aren't enough to make Overwatch 2 feel like a proper sequel. Like that's just not a justification for this. He also tries to justify that Overwatch 2 is different in the way that we're writing the game and how we're looking at the game going forward. I really hope that the roadmap that we just released is something that illustrates that to the players. And this is what the roadmap looks like for Season 6, for those who haven't seen it. And yes, there's story missions, but again, it's a far cry from what was originally promised. And look, there is a good amount of content here, a good amount of stuff that's coming, but is it Overwatch 2 levels of, wow, this feels like a fresh enough new experience or an enhanced enough experience where that 2 is justified? No, this just feels like you could have done this with Overwatch 1 as well. Keller highlights here that with Season 6, we have a new support hero coming out that season. We have a new game mode. We've never released a new game mode as a seasonal update ever in Overwatch. Again, is that what's going to justify the 2 in Overwatch 2? No, because just because you've never done that before doesn't mean that you couldn't have done that in Overwatch 1. It has 2 new maps coming out with Flashpoint. We are running a PvE event that season. We have a whole new type of PvE content that we're releasing with our single player hero mastery missions. Overwatch Anniversary is running another event, and then on top of all that, we've got the start of our new story arc with new story missions, cinematics, and other lore content such as a lore codex. It's all packed into this one season, and this is the future of what we're trying to bring to Overwatch 2. And look, it's great that there's a lot of stuff coming for the live service PvP component, but it doesn't change the fact that this model is ultimately familiar, and it doesn't spruce up the experience enough that this feels like the sequel that the PvE mode had the potential to make Overwatch 2 feel like, because that's actually something substantially new, something substantially different that was kind of going to recontextualize the way we play Overwatch, that would have really reinvigorated this series. And the news here insists that their goal is not to walk away from PvE, but rather move into a model that we know we can deliver on. We are not trying to abandon this side of the game. You are abandoning the version of PvE that we actually wanted and watering it down. That's not a different direction. That's just diminishing something that was supposed to be much grander. He stresses that they're moving away from that one big singular PvE release moment and are moving into a, no, we're going to do PvE stuff all the time, but again, in bite-sized pieces that will be spread out over a long period of time instead of one substantial thing that we can just kind of absorb ourselves in and see it all the way through in one sitting and have this one big epic experience instead of bite-sized pieces spread throughout the course of months and years. That's just not going to have the same effect. It's not the thing that people were expecting, but also we have high confidence that we can deliver in the way that we're shifting now. You guys had high confidence about the PvE mode that was originally promised before it was scrapped, so now it's impossible for me to have faith in their high confidence that they'll deliver on things when they failed to deliver on so many numerous accounts. Like, I'll believe it when I see it. It's hard to blame anyone who will no longer take Blizzard at their word for anything from here on out. News concluded by saying that for us, it just feels better to be on this path where we know we can consistently release updates to players, tell a story in an ongoing, unfolding way, and not wait for this big singular moment, if that makes sense. But I think that's what Overwatch has been lacking, that one big singular moment. You know, this was going to be the thing that everyone was going to be drawn to, including new players who maybe don't want to quite participate in the competitive side of things, but would have loved to participate in some kind of cooperative PvE kind of environment or mode. They could have drawn in so many new players with this mode that could have appealed to a whole new audience. In fact, this is something that the interview addresses with one of the questions, bringing up the point that the PvE was looking like a tool to broaden the appeal of the game. News admitted that if you only enjoy single-player or PvE-only experiences, then Overwatch is going to be a little bit tough for you right now. And yes, there are bite-sized story missions and PvE stuff that is coming alongside the live service component, sort of integrated with the PvP live service aspect, but it's not going to be the thing that's going to draw in those folks who prefer those kinds of single-player campaign-driven PvE experiences, because features have been scaled back so much, because it's so much more diluted, and because it's spread out so much over the course of, you know, days, weeks, months, whatever it might be, and it's not just one continuous big epic experience. One last topic worth talking about from this interview is a question that brought up the impact that scrapping the PvE may have had on the development team. News insists that no adverse impact has been had on the team. We weren't letting people go who were working on PvE, and he has said that the folks who are working on that mode have been repurposed to work on the PvE aspects that will be brought into the live service that will be significantly watered down from what was promised. So thankfully, based on what news is saying at least, team members don't seem to have suffered from this and jobs are still intact. But at the same time, this has all got to be a huge morale hit for the studio. No doubt it was when they made the decision months ago that the originally envisioned PvE mode would be scrapped, and now with the second wave of negative sentiments as a result of the backlash that Blizzard is receiving, now that the news is out there that this is being scrapped, that PvE mode, the one that was going to be that large-scale epic experience, is no longer a thing. And now that we're learning that they've, you know, had this knowledge that this was going to be scrapped for months now, and they decided not to tell us until now, and how frustrating and confusing and baffling this all is. No doubt that's going to create a ripple effect of negative optics and sentiments and bad will and just a further loss in faith in Blizzard, this company that is just nowhere near at the level where they once used to be during their golden days. It just feels like a continuous decline. And it's a damn shame, because it pains me to see Blizzard go through this kind of turmoil when they have so many amazing IPs that they could leverage. And who knows what the future holds with the release of Diablo 4 and whatnot. But as far as Overwatch goes, they struck gold, and I feel like they're failing woefully to capitalize on it. I don't know what the hell happened here, but yeah, no, Overwatch 2 at this point, it really does feel like such a disaster. I know a lot of people still have fun with it because the core Overwatch experience is very much still fun, but Overwatch 2 could have been so much more, and it just sucks that it's not that. Like, that was going to be the thing. The PvE mode was going to be a thing that was going to draw me back into Overwatch. It's hard for me to feel any semblance of interest surrounding this IP right now, and it sucks because the potential is there. Or at the very least, that's one man's take. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on Overwatch 2's PvE hero mode being completely canned or being turned into a shadow of its former self, its promised self. by being integrated into the live service component in a way that's significantly scaled back. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.